to one another, reminding ourselves of that priority. And so today I'm really fortunate to have a good friend of mine, Rabbi Joey Krakoff, joining me, who is a senior director of Jewish Hospice of Michigan, and to share with us as well, as we have been blessed to work together for 25 years now. I think Joey came to town a year or two after me, and have been connected. So welcome.
Great to be here. I feel like I aged a little bit in the process, but no, we've been together a long time, and I've only worked in Michigan, so it's been a great run.
Well, yes, you worked in Michigan, but our initial connection is through my brother, Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz, who you taught with when you were at JTS in New York City.
Correct.
And that was the connection when Steve called me and said, "Hey, Joey's coming to town. Can you meet with him and talk to him about, how great Michigan is?" And I was only here for a year and already believed that. And look at you and me,
Right.
blessed to be here for all this time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you've been working with hospice now for a number of years and are really the face of that in our community. I call you all the time with a family in need, reach out to you. Talk to us about what hospice is and what it's able to provide for our families.
Sure. I think hospice is very compassionate care at the end of life. We definitely help people in the final chapter of their lives, and we do everything we can to give them really the highest quality of life possible at the time. Hospice is a scary idea for people because it means that people are closer to the end. But the truth of the matter is that hospice is there to take care of their every need, to meet them where they're at. At Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network, which I've now been at for 7 years, we make every medical hospice, we call it every medical hospice, a Jewish hospice, as we bring in spiritual care, we bring in social work care, we bring in navigation and advocacy and life enrichment services. So we work with every medical hospice in the community, every single one of them. And we do everything we can to meet every Jew where they're at, whether they're religious or not religious, secular, Jewish, culturally Jewish, whatever it is. We're there to figure out what will work best for them, meet them where they're at, and really truly bring them everything we can to bring them peace and to bring them comfort at the end of life, to help them get their affairs in order. We do everything we can for every single patient that we serve, as well as taking care of their families.
It's interesting when I hear you speak about it on that level, because hospice, for as long as I've been a rabbi, has been something that has been advocated for and helped families. But I can't imagine now in my work not having it as Jewish hospice. It's like such a natural and logical connection, but that didn't always exist.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the idea really, Rabbi Bunny Friedman, who is our CEO and founding director, 20 years ago, had this idea that Jews want to die Jewishly. And even if they're not observant, and even if Judaism hasn't been as important in their life throughout, at the very end of life, they want to die like their ancestors died and feel connected, to the history of the Jewish people. And so a lot of times what people will say when we do an intake call is they're not ready for a rabbi. And as their condition worsens and as they decline, more often than not, they are ready for a rabbi because the biggest question is, what happens when I die? People want to know, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. They want to know, like, is there another life out there? Is this the end? What does Jewish tradition teach? And so a lot of times at the end, that's sort of the inroad for us in that conversation to be able to provide care for people that may be a little reticent of having a rabbi.
Yeah, I can think some conversations I've had, some of the most awesome, powerful conversations with individuals by their bedside, asking those questions. And of course, I don't have the answers. I can talk about tradition, but sort of having those real conversations with someone who is looking at that. It's great hypothetically to talk about it, to teach about what happens when we die and Jewish views of life or death, but to someone who's right there at that door, and to hear their perspective then too. It's some of the most important times I've had in my career. What advice could you give to a family who may be thinking or wondering or curious in that sense too?
A lot of times what we find is that the person who has the terminal illness actually wants to talk about it, And so often when we would go into the hospitals, and hopefully soon we'll be able to do that again, but so often, I'm sure you found this as well, there'd be a sign on the door that says, please don't use the H word, meaning hospice, right? And I mean, there's so many stories I could tell you of times that patients have cleared the room of all their family members and loved ones and said, Rabbi, I know that I'm dying. I know that I'm on hospice. I want to talk about it, but my loved ones don't want to talk about it. And I need to talk about it. I need to make arrangements. I need to give a blessing to my family members. I need to do this. Can you help me help them get their head around the fact that I'm sick and I'm going to die? And so, that's a lot of what we do as well. And so the advice in that realm is, I think that when people are able to talk about it, and these are the hardest conversations we're ever going to have, right? I mean, ever. These are very difficult. These are final conversations. But what a blessing when you have the opportunity to say goodbye and to be able to open up and put it all out there and cry and laugh and celebrate legacy and share memories. Those are all amazing opportunities. And over again, I'm sure you found this as well, is when we go in and we are able to do that with families, after the person dies, the family thanks us and says, I never would have thought that would have been as meaningful as it was. So almost always, people that are dying want to talk about it. And it's the family members that are more reticent for good reason. I mean, it's certainly understandable, but I would encourage families to talk about it.
Yeah. That's even, I would even go one step further too, to say we always should be talking about like what our expectations are and our own ideas, so that our family, when we're healthy, so our family members know.
Right. Sure.
Right.
Sure.
God forbid that we know that as well. And so there's no guessing around it. So we can make that conversation that much easier in a sense too.
Yeah, I was just having that conversation with somebody yesterday. And I said, we should do this while we're healthy, and why it's hypothetical, but let's not have our loved ones who are going to be here after we die have to guess what we want. They want to fulfill our wishes. Let's tell them what our wishes are.
Yeah. It's interesting. We think sometimes we choose the path in our career, and sometimes our path becomes that calling. It chooses us. I know you've written a book now, a few years ago, it's published, Never Long Enough, Finding Comfort and Hope Among Grief and Loss. And I remember when you were first coming out of school, I mean, you wrote your thesis, I believe, about that. The book was based on some of the work you did with your thesis at the end of rabbinical school. So obviously, which it was not what I was thinking about when I was a young rabbi first coming out. Now it's something that I'm much more reflective about because of my experiences and being able to be engaged with the community on this level. But I was sort of, amazed that you, as 26, 27 years old, you're like talking about this and thinking about this. So your path and why that direction?
Yeah, I was always drawn to end of life care. I've always been drawn to sort of the vulnerability of it and the fact that it's a very hard space to be in. There's something about it that just always interests me. And because it was so difficult and I really want to help people across those difficult moments, it's just sort of where I found myself. I mean, maybe if I go back and think that I remember when my grandfather died many years ago, my family didn't insist on me going to the funeral. I had never been to a funeral before. And while I know that was a compassionate decision on their part, it may have been a mistake because, I didn't know what happened. And it's always scarier when you don't know what happens. I mean, people ask me all the time, is it okay to take kids to funerals? And obviously every situation on a case-by-case basis is, you have to consider, and parents know their kids better than anyone. But more often than not, I actually encourage families to bring kids to funerals because I think that they see what happens and we explain it and we prepare them in advance. But so often if we keep them away from that, it's a lot scarier to them in their head, and so I think for me, I think partly the idea of demystifying everything, being able to just be open and honest. And I think people can deal with it. I think people can deal with the truth a lot better when it's put out there. And again, obviously there's certain situations where that's not the case. So I've always been drawn to that area. Also, like when people say that there's nothing else that can be done, when doctors say there's nothing else we can do, I think that's when we are able to do our best work at Jewish Hospice. And it's part of sort of what I've always been, the idea of healing the soul. Like I've never accepted the fact that, yes, there is a time, although we never give up on a miracle. We can't depend on it either. So in the prayer for healing, the Mishaberach, right? We pray for refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf. Refuat haguf is praying for the healing of the body. When the healing of the body is impossible, we have so much work left to do with refuat hanefesh, with the healing of the soul. And so I've always been drawn to this idea of being able to help people heal their souls. And that I think is powerful and meaningful work, and the honor of, as I'm sure you feel this way too, to be able to be with individuals who are ill at those moments, that they let us in and they allow us into the innermost sanctum and with their families. And it's a tremendous honor to be there. And I take that honor very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. Your title of your book, though, I think is going, you talk about healing the soul right now, finding comfort and hope among grief and loss. And I think, I was reading Rabbi Naomi Levy's book, The Journey Toward Comfort, Strength, and Faith in Difficult Times. Like that, we're going to have loss, difficult times. We're going to have grief. We can't anesthetize these things. Right. We have to like I think so too much in our society, we want to end sadness. Instead of saying sadness is a part of our lives, let's grow with that and allow ourselves to be sad. Like when someone says, my reaction, this is my challenge in life. When someone tells me they're sad, I really want to pull them up. I want to lift them up. I want to make them happy. And I've come to realize that's not what is always needed or right, that we should be sad with someone and help them in being sad and sharing that.
Right. Yeah. They need to be sad. They need to be in the valley of the shadow of death for however long they need to be there. In terms of the book, you're right. A lot of the grief work that I've done and a lot of the thinking that went into that book is really reminiscent of when I was doing my my rabbinic rotation in rabbinical school, going into Shiva house after Shiva house and hearing people coming in to perform the mitzvah of comforting, saying to the mourner, so when do you think you'll be back to normal? And it just made my head pop off, because be back to normal. First of all, it's a new normal. And I'm not even sure normal, by the way, is the right word. I think that's a misnomer, but people need to grieve, and everybody's grief is different, and there's no linear grief. And, for whatever reason, we're uncomfortable with people grieving, and we have to give people the space and the permission. We as outsiders have to give people the space to grieve, and they have to give themselves permission to grieve. That grief is a result of the fact that this relationship was so special and meaningful in my life, and it's not here anymore. And I need to deal with that emotionally. So, grief is different for everyone. And, we really do need to do a better job as a society of giving people the space to grieve, however long it takes.
Right. But I also agree, the idea of that funeral and, keeping children away. I always say, like you said as well, the idea of age matters, but every child's unique, and your children best or your grandchildren. But so often, especially when it's not a tragedy, God forbid, but those funerals are filled with laughter as well as tears, right? It's such a celebration, and there's so many great stories. I always love and been to a number of funerals that you officiated when I learned something new about a person I had no idea about, and enlightened about that, and it sort of lifts me up. I'm like, wow. I also feel, though, at times, I wish I knew that before, and I could have talked to her about that. I could have talked to him about that.
Sure.
Like Rabbi Daniel Schwartz and I were talking about this too. And while we're trying to get people stories, that, someone who immigrated to this country, and we learned about that as we're preparing for a funeral and had no idea. And we're like, gosh, so we want to hear these now too, and celebrate that. And people do appreciate it. This has been a tremendous year, obviously, for us all. Different. We've never experienced anything like this in the work we do. I think I know the answer without asking, but what's been the biggest challenge for you in your work as a hospice rabbi, and especially now in this time?
Yeah, the loneliness and the alienation and the isolation of it all. We are very proud at Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network of saying, not only do we meet every Jew where they're at, but we make sure that no Jew is ever alone. Well, March of last year, we were catapulted into this idea of everybody being in their homes and not coming out, and us as spiritual caregivers not being able to go into their homes, maybe to their windows if we were lucky. So the isolation, the alienation of it all, and thankfully, as so many people did, we used technology and social media to be able to connect with people. So that was one real big challenge that, thank God, we're now emerging from. But the other was, again, I'm sure you experienced the same thing, when I would go to and officiate at a funeral and be at the cemetery by myself, be there with the person from the funeral home who was filming it, and the cemetery workers. And because people were either out of town and couldn't fly in because they would have to, then isolate, or just because the person had COVID. And I mean, there's just so many different stories of just being alone. And it broke my heart time after time after time to be at the cemetery alone, not to have the traditional shiva. I mean, we as a religion in particular are meant to be in community. We're meant to be together, and we couldn't be. And
Yeah.
it was really hard, really, really hard. And thank God we're emerging. And I pray for the day and time when, we can all be together again, families can be together again, and we can mourn as a community and celebrate the life and legacy of loved ones. And that was really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all have felt that, experienced that, just the idea of hugging someone at a grave, a mourner,
Yeah.
right? And that reality. I had a mourner recently turn and hug me after he just has buried his father a few weeks ago, and then realized, oh wait, we can't do that. And it was a really awkward moment. Like, have we just violated our health protocols? And because it's who we are, and we haven't been able to. And I really, I feel for you and the work you're constantly doing, but we're all, like you said, experiencing that as well. So let's leave us on a positive. What's been most rewarding in this work that you can share with us, that we can carry with us as well?
Yeah, so we have really, in a lot of ways, reinvented our organization. I mean, people used to think of us as an organization you go to die, and people now more and more are thinking of a place where you go, an organization where you go to live your best life, whatever is left of that life. I mean, we're providing people with all kinds of what we call life enrichments, providing with music, and we're providing with exercise, all right now on Zoom. But we've got music, and we've got exercise, and we've got pet visits, which you're going to do for us, one on Thursday with your dog. When we're not in COVID, we were doing people's hair and their nails. I mean, we were finding that they would stop going to their doctor before they'd stop going to the salon. Is like, if they could go out one place a week, they would go to get their nails done. So we were doing, salon services, and we had a guy who the last thing he wanted was a haircut, but couldn't get out of the house. We got him a haircut before he died. We were doing massage and reflexology, and all of those things we're going to be doing again just as soon as it's safe, and hopefully that's sooner than later. So we are about giving people, sort of granting their wishes of how we can enhance their life at the end, and treating them, as our Jewish tradition teaches, fully and completely alive while they're in this world. And it gives me just great satisfaction each day to bring smiles to people's faces and see joy in their hearts, even when they're in the last chapter of their lives.
It's beautiful. And I will say that you do it well. You're such a kind, gentle, caring, loving person that people appreciate your presence and your spirit when you're there with them too. And it's really nice that you're able to perform. You're able to, your work is doing these mitzvot, right? And it's a real blessing that you get to do, but for us too, for our community. So I'll give a shout out, Never Long Enough, Finding Comfort and Hope Among Grief and Loss. Your book is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. Other good purveyors, I'm sure, as well. I'm making this up as I go along, but I just know it's got to be. And yes, my dog and I will be with you on Thursday. She's very excited for this, and that her she's appeared at services a couple times this year, but we're looking forward to that as well. Thank you. Other things on the Shir Shalom calendar just for this week: tomorrow night, Tuesday night, March 9th, is another Hot Topics session. Rabbi Daniel will be teaching this week, and it's going to be, can innovation go too far? Particularly looking at Pesach, but how we innovate Jewish tradition, and what are there boundaries, and how do we wrestle with that? Wednesday night at 8 p.m., that class is 8 p.m. on Tuesday night. 8 p.m. on Wednesday night is our trivia night, not Jewish trivia, just trivia night. It's a game, it's a competition. There are prizes. and the big prizes, and it's exciting. So get on a team, come and join us for that. And then we're starting our cooking series next Monday, I believe, as well. So you can see all of that on our YouTube and on our Facebook for the information on that too. And Paul Wirtz, our caterer, and Chef Hobby will be doing the cooking and creative, spicing up Pesach, making it fresh next Monday, his cooking. So all good stuff. Rabbi Krakoff, thank you for your time this morning to start our week together, to really get us thinking about important things that we all should be thinking about, but how we can help each other as well. It really is a mitzvah and a blessing that we get to share in this together. So thanks.
Thank you. Always good to be together.
Definitely. Take care, everyone. Have a good week.